last, the European Union has revealed the date for the beginning of the entry-exit system, the EES, which will now start, we believe, on the 12th of October 2025. Unlike the original plan, this is going to be nothing like the so-called Big Bang that we were promised when it was due to be opened in
UK Connors, Brexit betrayal, EU border chaos. If you're planning a European getaway anytime soon, you need to watch this. Trust me. Hit that subscribe button right now because what's about to happen at European airports could absolutely derail your holiday plans, and nobody's telling us exactly when or how. This is a mess that Brussels has created, and frankly, it's a kind of political chaos that defines post-Brexit Britain. Stick around because we're breaking down exactly what's happening, why the EU's being criminally vague about it all, and what it means for your travel plans come this Sunday. Let's be brutally honest. The European Union has absolutely dropped the ball on communication. We're talking about a massive new border system rolling out across the entire EU, the entry or exit system, or EES as the bureaucrats like to call it, and Brussels couldn't even be bothered to give a UK a proper heads-up. With less than 48 hours until this system goes live on October 12, 2025, and the EU member states are still playing coy about which airports will actually be implementing these new checks. It's almost impressive, really, how spectacularly they've managed to handle this. Almost. Here's where it gets really interesting. The Home Office, our Home Office, mind you, specifically asked the EU for a definitive list of airports introducing the EES. You know what they got back? Radio silence wrapped in bureaucratic excuses. Brussels and the individual member states have essentially refused to provide a clear answer. We're not talking about some minor administrative tweak here. We're talking about a system that requires every single traveler, and yes, we mean everyone, to have their passport scanned, their fingerprints taken, and their photographs recorded. This is biometric data collection on an industrial scale, and the EU couldn't even manage to tell us when it's happening. The irony is absolutely delicious. Britain leaves the European Union to take back control, and what happens? The EU institutions become even more opaque and incompetent. Now, British passport holders are going to be caught in the crossfire of this administrative nightmare, and the EU member states have left the UK government scrambling to piece together information from media reports and scattered conversations with various governments. This is what happens when you've got 27 different member states all supposedly coordinating a unified border system. Spoiler alert, they're not coordinating particularly well. So what do we actually know? Well, 3 countries, Estonia, Luxembourg, and the Czech Republic, have at least had the courtesy to be honest about their intentions. They are rolling out the full EES system for absolutely everyone arriving and departing from day one. October 12th. That's it. The full Monty. But then you've got Germany, which is taking the cautious approach and only introducing the system at Düsseldorf Airport. Norway, which isn't even in the EU but somehow has to play along with all this, is implementing checks at Oslo. And then there's Spain, the most popular holiday destination for British travelers, by the way, which is just doing a single test run with 1 flight arriving at Madrid. 1 flight. On the first day. That's the level of coordination we're dealing with here. Now, if you're thinking about popping over to Spain for some autumn sunshine, you might get lucky. You might also become part of an experiment. Really inspiring stuff from our continental neighbors, isn't it? The problem is that we don't know which scenario applies to which destination. That's the absolute core of this disaster. British travelers have no clarity whatsoever. Are you facing biometric registration at your departure airport? Your arrival airport? Both? Neither? The EU member states haven't bothered telling anyone, and frankly, that's a failure of governance so spectacular it almost deserves a round of applause. Let's talk about what the EES actually is, because this isn't just some minor paperwork change. This is the EU's replacement for old-fashioned passport stamping. Every non-EU citizen, and that includes British passport holders now, which is a fun part about Brexit, has to register their biometric data. That means your fingerprints and your photograph get stored in an EU database. The system is supposedly designed to track compliance with a 90-day visa-free travel rule and strengthen border control. Lovely. Except children under 12 don't get fingerprinted. They just get photographed and have digital record created, which honestly sounds even more dystopian when you put it that way. Babies, digital records, in an EU database. Let that sink in. The delays, though, that's what should genuinely worry you. The UK government has already anticipated massive queues at airports across Europe. They are also preparing for delays at the Channel ports. Port of Dover, Eurotunnel at Folkestone, Eurostar at St. Pancras International. All of them. The process will happen at the border before you leave the UK, which is something, at least, but the sheer computational load of registering millions of travelers' biometric data simultaneously across the entire EU is going to be extraordinary. Queue time could stretch for hours. Peak travel time could become absolute nightmares. The Home Office has tried to put a positive spin on this, obviously. They've ploughed £10.5 million into helping UK ports and operators get ready for the system. Keir Mather, the Minister for Aviation, Maritime and Decarbonisation, came out with a standard statement about working closely with European partners and local resilience forums to keep traffic flowing smoothly. Minimize disruption. Keep journeys smooth. Sure, Keir, that's what happens when you've got a system that nobody's properly coordinated and nobody's properly explained. But here's the thing that really grinds my gears about all of this. The EU created this system. The EU rolled it out with no proper communication strategy. The EU member states couldn't coordinate a unified implementation timeline. And now the UK is sitting here trying to manage the fallout for British travellers without even having basic information. That's not just incompetence. That's almost deliberately antagonistic. The EU spent years being difficult about Brexit, and now they can't even manage a simple border system properly. What this reveals is something deeper about the relationship between Britain and the European Union post-Brexit. We're no longer inside the tent. We're outside looking in, and the institutions that once coordinated with us, however reluctantly, no longer feel obligated to give us straight answers. They are happy to let us scramble. They are happy to let British travellers face potential chaos at airports across Europe while they figure out their own internal coordination problems. Because that's what this is fundamentally. The EES isn't specifically about punishing British travellers. It's about the EU's sheer inability to implement anything coherently, and British travellers are just a collateral damage. If you're planning to travel to the EU this autumn, you need to prepare yourself for potential delays. Give yourself extra time at the airport. Expect queues. Download any apps the relevant countries are recommending. Register your information in advance if you possibly can. Don't assume that things will move smoothly, because they won't. Not on October 12th. Probably not for several weeks afterwards either. The EU system will be overwhelmed. The computers will struggle. The staff will be confused. And we'll all be reading stories about travelers missing their flights and family holidays being disrupted. The real tragedy here is that this was all preventable. If the EU member states had coordinated properly, if they communicated clearly with non-EU governments, if they'd staggered the rollout over several weeks instead of trying to implement everything simultaneously, we could have avoided this. But they didn't, because they're Europe, and chaos and bureaucratic incompetence are basically their brand at this point. So here you have it. The entry-or-exit system arrives in less than 48 hours. Nobody knows exactly how it's going to be implemented. British travellers are going to face potential chaos at European airports and ports, and the EU is handling the whole thing with typical continental style. That is to say, they're not handling it at all. Welcome to post-Brexit Britain, where we get to watch Europe implode from the outside while our citizens deal with the consequences. If you found this breakdown helpful, you absolutely need to subscribe to UK Connors because we break down political chaos, government incompetence, and the real-world impact of policy decisions that actually matter. We don't do fluff here. We tell you what's actually happening, why it's happening, and what it means for you. Subscribe now, and make sure you never miss when we expose the next political disaster on the horizon.